Hello all, welcome back. So there had been so many comments about it, and I didn't forget about it. I guess I kind of got busy a little bit. But this is the second video in the series where we are explaining how you do a upgrade from NAV 2016 to Business Central 23. In the first part of this video, we did talk about how you do a data upgrade from NAV 2016 to Business Central 14. And if you are interested in it, go to the channel. It's in the upgrade playlist, I guess, if I'm not wrong. And you'll notice that there is a video which talks about how you do an upgrade from NAV 2016 to Business Central 14. For the demo purposes, we use North American version, and there was some customization as the people who requested it were added into the NAV 2016 database. So moving forward from there, and I cannot promise when the next part of this video is coming up because I'm a little bit busy again. So sorry for that. If you're looking for it, there might be a little bit delay, but I'll try to finish it as soon as possible. So let's kind of do a quick recap around the customizations that we had. So let me open my development environment for Business Central 14. And let's open the 2016 NA, which is now in Business Central 14 at this moment. So if you look at it, there were some modified tables, two modified tables with some fields added into it, like this. And same on the vendor, those fields are available on the list pages. And then there was a completely new table into the in 2016, which then came to BC14. Now, before we talk about further, let's understand what we are going to talk about in this video. This video is mostly focus on how you kind of take these customization and convert them to an extension. And there's something that Microsoft provides a tool, how to use it. We'll talk about it because that will be a prerequisite before we do the data migration in the next step. That we have the object merge done for the Business Central 23 or whatever the version that you're going to. So what we are going to do is we are going to convert these customization to an extension, and then going forward in the future videos, we'll talk about the migration of the data. And just to keep it simple, because right now it's only caters some tables and some pages, new tables, standard tables, and new pages and standard pages. Just for the sake of explaining, what I'll do is I'll also copy a report. Let's pick customer top 10. Okay, and I'll just do a save as of this report into 50,000. Okay, assuming that this is your custom report. Okay, and I'll change the name to cust or my cust top 10 list. Okay, now this report is also available as a custom object in my database. As far as code unit is considered, let's pick a code unit. Pretty easy one. I don't want the for the example, I don't want it to make it a little bit complex, so let's find copy item. Okay, and let's assume this kind of code unit also you have created into a 50,000 number. I'll just change it to 50,000 and call my copy item. Okay, I guess that'll be more than sufficient to kind of understand the logic how the conversion happens. So we have a custom code unit, and we also have a custom report at this moment. Now let's understand how the whole AL model works. In AL, when you have a new table, that's represented as a table, obviously. In the same way, if you have a new page, that's represented as a page, and same for any other object. So these are called new objects, and the tool helps you to kind of convert these objects. The other piece of equation is where we are modifying the base Microsoft object, which is, let's say, customer table, vendor table, and these two pages. Now, how ALX understands it is with the concept of extension object. If you are modifying a base Microsoft table with doing additive changes, no destructive changes, then you can use something called as table extension. Same for the page, there's a page extension. Not in the initial versions, but later on, Business Central also introduced a report extension. If we modify any code units from Microsoft, then that need to be handled by using event and subscription. There's no modification allowed on the query XML port part. If you modify something, you will have to kind of save it into a 50,000 number and then make it as a new object. You can't modify. There's no extension object in general for these two objects. So the tool will help you, that we are going to talk about, to convert whatever is possible from these limited perspective. One, if there is a new object like these, the tool will try to convert it to a new object as it is, and that tool also applies to queries and XML port and any other object. When it comes to the base object, the tool will do justice as best as it can for tables and pages and try to convert them to a table extension and to page extension. When it comes to report, the tool does not support it because when the tool was released, report extension was not an object in AL. And I'm pretty sure I tried it. It doesn't work even today to convert a report changes into a report extension. Same for the code unit. If this base code unit modified, the tool will give you nothing and you'll have to manually merge it in. And queries and XML port we talked about that you cannot modify it. So we'll spend a good amount of time in understanding what the tool can do and what it cannot do. So let's first understand what the tool is. So when you install Business Central 14 in your installation folder, which is in x86, I guess. Okay, yeah, in your old tailor client folder, there are different kind of files here, and then there is a file or exe called txt2al exe. Now to launch this is a command line utility, so you will have to open your command prompt, and in the command prompt we'll navigate to this path, and then you can just say txt2al. Now there are some things that we need to remember how we used this tool, so we'll spend a little bit time into it before we start executing it. So when you type txt2al, it gives you the help of that tool because it needs some parameter. So let's try to decipher what these parameters are. So the first parameter that it suggests is called source path, and let me try to zoom this in if I can somehow. Otherwise I'll get a complaint later that we were not able to see it. So I think there should be something here. Okay, that went pretty crazy. Okay, let's make it 36. That sounds fair. Let me try to make this big. Okay, yeah. So the first parameter that you see is source, and it's a path that you need to specify on this, which is required. It's a mandatory parameter, and this parameter holds the path of the file where these text file, NAV text files are placed. Okay. Then the next is target, which also holds a path where you want the conversion to store the objects that has been converted. Rename by default is true, but I would like to set this up because there are some other properties which are dependent on it. It kind of helps renaming your objects so that they don't have the same name as the actual CAL files. Then type, which I have never used because I would like it to convert everything in my text file. But if you are only looking for certain objects, then you can say that, okay, from this file, I would only like to convert code units, and then it'll only do that. Then the interesting part is here, extension start ID. So in our scenario, where we are modifying the customer table, the customer extension table will require a unique ID. This parameter defines from where you want to start the ID. If you don't define this parameter, the default number that will taken for extension object will be from 7 million. and it'll just be incremented one by one. So you can define that based on this parameter. Then extractor is something trace that I have not used, but it kind of helps you to see what errors, if there are any. Fallback type name resolution. This just tries to do the best to kind of make sure that your name is unique and all, which is not needed. .NET add-ins, it can put the references of the .NET packages into your AL converted files. If you're using it, I would highly recommend not to use it, because with the Universal Code Initiative, your customers will be charged for it if you use .NET on-prem also. We'll leave that this also. Multi-threaded, if you have a very huge object set, you can use multi-thread. I never found a reason to kind of use multi-threaded parameter into it. Same for .NET, we'll leave anything .NET at this point. And this is for translation, which is your caption ML, which kind of generate the XLF file for your translations. Nothing here. And then here is runtime. Now here you can specify for which AL version, the platform or the runtime version you would like to convert it to. Every version of Business Central gets a unique runtime. So if you want conversion to be taken care based on a specific runtime version, then you can specify it based on major and minor. I normally skip it because it automatically defaults to the latest supported runtime, which is 13 at this moment. Then the file naming, because in AL everything is a file. How you want your objects to be named, that you can define here. So the default is the name of the object and then the type of object, but you can specify a pattern based on these parameters: name, which is object name, type, IDs. And this will only work, if you remember I said it earlier, if the rename is defined. So if you don't define the rename property, then this will not work. So this is for the new objects, and this is for the extension object, how you want to name those files. I'm not saying about the object, I'm just saying about the file naming. Then format, it just make sure that the format is applied to your output file that has been generated. The data classification defaulting helps you to define the data classification property for the all table fields if it is not already defined in BC14. And then help is for help. So we all know it, how it does it and what it does. So now what should we do? Should we just give it all my customized object and it will do the magic? Not exactly. So let me reduce this to a little bit smaller so that we all can see it. Okay. Now let's understand what type of input source this text-to-AL conversion tool takes. Text-to-AL conversion tool works on the delta file that you need to generate for your NAV objects. Now, what is a delta file? A delta file is generated when you compare two object set and it identifies what is the difference between those two files and generates a kind of a differential delta between the two files. So in case of new object like these, there will be no delta because they don't exist in the initial part of the comparison, because these are new objects. But in this case, the delta file will only generate a reference to this field because this has been added, and same for other objects. So now let's head up and start building our delta file. Okay, so how you do that? So first, let's open your PowerShell. If you have PowerShell ISE, great. If you don't have it, you can just search for it. Make sure you run it as administrator. Then load the module that will help you to get these commands, which is the import module, and then you get it from program files x86, Microsoft Dynamics 365 Business Central 140, a role tailor client, and then PS1. Now this module, once you load it, gives you certain set of commands, and you can notice it here that it gives you option to export nav application object. You can also import, but that's not for BC, that's just for BC14. So we'll only talk about that are useful right now. So you can export objects, you can compare application object, and then you can, even if you are on NAV Word, you can also merge nav application object. But right now what we'll need is how we can export application object and how we can compare. Now I get a lot of question, oh, why should I use PowerShell and why I cannot download it directly from the client? And that makes sense, and we'll try that. So first let's do that. So to create a delta, I'll need an original file. Original file is where these customizations does not exist in the object. So what I've already have is a database of Cronus where it's BC14CU10. That's my source. And what I'll do is I'll keep them side by side and I'll start marking these objects here. Oh, I also have it modified. Let me find another one. Okay, I guess this is the Cronus. Okay. So I'll say 18. Then I'll say 23. 50,000 will not exist into it. And then directly the page 22. And then 27. And that's it. These are my standard Microsoft object that I have modified for my region. So what I'll do, I'll just extract this file out, export it out, and place it somewhere. Let's create a folder here. Demo compare. Okay. This I'll call original, where this is coming from Microsoft at this point. And in this, I don't have permission. Seriously? Okay, just give me a minute. Let me check that. Okay. So I have to upload the license, which I've done. So I'll select all these files and then export them out as original. Okay, done. I'll do same here, that this is my all customized object set, and I'll say okay, and I'll say it custom. So now I already have two files, which is an original file and a custom file. So now I can come back to PowerShell and start doing a compare nav application object. And I'm not telling you that this is the right way, but just to prove why you should not be doing this, I guess I'm doing this. That's the reason. So your original path is the path of the original file. Okay. So this becomes my original file. I'll just copy the path and paste it here. The modified file is, I'll copy it from here, and then the delta path is where I would like to store the delta, which is the comparison output. And then we'll talk about it in a while, but even if you select it in here, it doesn't impact that, and I'll explain you what that means. So let's check that off also, not a problem. And then I'll say ignore documentation. So if there is a only change in the documentation, then don't worry about it, and things like that. This will generate some delta file here when I run this. So as I run this, it said it added 4 new objects, which we had in our custom environment. We had these two and this 3 objects here, and an object here as 4 custom object. So it said the result of the comparison is that the 4 new objects were found, which is this inserted, and there were 4 objects which are modified, which is these 2 and these 2. What happened behind the scene is these delta files are generated. Let's have a quick look into it. The code unit delta is actually a complete code unit file because it's an object, right? So it have everything that's needed at this point. But what about the table delta? Let's see. Sorry. So when I open the table delta, you'll notice it's not a complete object. It just lists out what has been changed and where it has been changed. Okay. So it says table 18 has been modified. And then there is an insert happened after this CFID relation field. and somebody added a field called 50,000. Now this becomes your input file set for your text to AL conversion, all these different files. This is your input that you feed to text to AL, and the tool will be able to read this and convert it into an AL object. So we'll do it complete and then we'll understand what went wrong. So I'll create a folder called AL. Okay, let's go back to the command prompt and let's try writing our command. I'll do a text to AL and then we'll start feeding it the properties as we talked about right now. So the first property that we have is the source path. So let's define the source path, which is my folder here called data. All the files in this folder should be considered for it. So I define that space, and then there are two, every parameter is starts with this. If you look at the help later, where you want to place them. So I would like to place them into this folder called AL. Okay. Now we did talk about rename, so let's say rename. And then any object that becomes an extension object, and I forgot this, extension start ID is equals to 50,000. That's how I wanted, right? And then for object naming pattern, we did talk about that property, object file name pattern. I would like system to generate, let's say SDH, which is my prefix, guys, and we'll talk about it in a while. Name dot type, and that's it. And then there will be this is for new object, and then for the extension object I would have to define the extension object file name pattern. What is that pattern becomes? That becomes the fixed word, which is my prefix, and then the object name. Okay, and then the type, and that's it. So let's quickly revisit this, what I've written here. So what I've said is, whenever you are doing this text to AL conversion for me in this scenario, take the input from this folder, the Delta folder. Anything that you are able to convert, put it into this folder. Rename all the files that you are converting. And if you see an extension object, start the extension ID from 50,000. If you find a new object, which you will find in our case, the name of the file should start with this syntax. And if you find an extension object, then the name starts with this syntax, and you can change it as needed. You can just read it here in the help what you can use. So let's hit enter and let's see the magic. So it started doing something and it started creating something, which is a lot of files. But okay, let's go in there. Let's open this with code and see what it did for us. So first let's see the table extension. So for the vendor table, it created a table extension. It did not name the table extension, which is something that you have to do manually. And it says that it is extending the vendor table, and it automatically added that field. It also did that for my customer table. Okay. Now what about my new table? So if I look at my new table, it have the table name, this, and it also added all the field. It also defined some table relation and did some changes, all the changes as needed. Let's look at the page extension. It did convert my page and added a field as with its best guessed that it had. Same for the customer list page. It also tried to add that field. When you look at the new page, it converted everything. Same for the report. It did convert my report and also splitted my report into a layout file separate, and also did the mapping that the report layout is placed here. Okay. And it also converted my code unit. But now I'll bring you why I said this is not the right way. in the beginning if you forgot about it. Now, in every word, your primary key or the relationship that happens between object is based on the object IDs. It's not based on the object names. Whereas in Business Central, every object is analyzed by the name or understood by the name, not by the object ID. So if I look at all these different objects that we looked right now, it wherever there was a reference, and let me show it to you where I'm saying it, it kind of failed at that point. So like if you look at it, okay, let's go up. You will notice that it says record 130. It is not able to understand what the 130 is, as in just because there are no symbols. But 130 reference is wrong. It should point to the object name, which is incoming document, obviously at this point. When you come to your report, you'll notice that it is referring every object with its number, not with its name. So remember this, and now we'll be doing it with the right way. Because otherwise, you'll be spending a lot of your time into changing these object numbers to object names. And believe me, it sometimes can be so painful that you'll say, okay, it's getting compiled, leave it. I don't worry about it. But we understand it, you understand it, that going forward, names are how system kind of relates object. So you should be doing it with the names. Okay. So what should we do to solve this problem? You should always download your objects, which is export nav application object using PowerShell. So now this time when I do an export nav objects from PowerShell, okay, what I need to specify here, the database name that I'm exporting from. Okay, first I'm exporting, let's say, from this, the demo database. So I'll get the info and I'll just copy the name of the database, paste it here. Where I would like to export this, I would like to export this into a separate folder, and I'll call it as, yeah, here, okay, and I'll call it as original new. Okay. The database server that for me is localhost, and I would like, remember this, to export to new syntax. Now during export, you can define this boolean called export to new syntax, which does something we'll see in a while. And then because I don't want to get into what I am licensed for or not, so I'm saying anything that is not in my license, don't export it. Now in the scenario that we are discussing, because this is just a dummy scenario, we have a little bit of objects which we know are modified. In a real world, you might not know what has been modified because you can't just rely on the modified flag. So I'm not applying any filter. I'm just saying export everything that is allowed in my license. Make sure it's exported into the new syntax, and this is the database name. This is the file name that I would like to give. So it will export some kind of files. Okay. It is because it seems I have multiple versions installed, so I need to run this from my development shell. So there is something called development shell, which is available from NAV 2016, I guess, which automatically loads this command. The only reason I use ISE is because it makes me easier to kind of see this parameter and I don't have to remember all this. So what I did, I just copied that command from here and I'm trying to paste it here so that it runs. Okay. Now while this is happening, let's also, because this time it is exporting everything in your database. Now let's build the command for our other database, which is this, which becomes this. So I'll say okay, and the file name that I would like for the modified object is called custom new. So I'll change it to custom new. Now what this will do again, this command will also export all objects which are in my license into a text file, and we'll see what happens with that. So let's wait for a while. What I'll do is I'll also run this command here, and then after that I'll resume the video. Okay, so the first file is out. Let me run it for the other one, not this one. and for the custom file, which is called custom new, and let me export this also. Okay, I'll wait for it. Okay, so both the files seems to be exported. Let's have a quick check on it. And we have both the files, custom new and original new. So now what we'll do, we'll just do a compare as we did last time. Beauty of the benefit of it is also that if you did not knew about any modified object, it'll just kind of automatically finds it. So I'm just changing the file names to new and new here also, and then let's do a delta new. Okay, okay, new folder, delta new. Okay, remember, while I was exporting, I have export to new syntax true. While I'm comparing, I have the export to new syntax true, because that's one of the major difference. And then I do a comparison. Now, because this time it is trying to compare all the objects that you have in the database, because the custom new and original new have all your objects in the database, the base and the custom. It'll take a little bit of time, but right now it is comparing every possible object that is in your license to see is there a customization other than documentation, because I have flipped the boolean true for ignore documentation. So it's actually comparing 6389 objects, and then it is writing some files to kind of come up with what happens after this. So now the delta new should have something, and there is a lot of stuff here which is completely wrong. Why there's a lot of stuff? Let me see what it is in this. Okay. Oh, because this is looking it from that perspective. Sorry for that. This is not apples to apple comparison. Let me figure out to kind of, because I restored that database today, and I guess that's where the problem is. Let me figure out the right set of the objects so that I can database so that I can get the exact files. Because at the end of the day, there should be exactly the same set of objects that were there, and only 4 objects should be here. So let's wait for a while and I'll resume it. So sorry for that, I'm not able to find the exact original file. So what I'm going to do is, for the demo purposes, I'm going to export these files into different sets. Okay, sorry for that, but what I'm going to do is this time export nav application object, and my original file comes from my original database, which is the demo database. So I'll say my demo database, download my original files from here and place them, and I'll create a folder this time because there will be separate files. So I'll call original. Okay, and place all my original file here. Okay, so this becomes my path, and then I'm making sure that export to new syntax is true. Anything that is not in my license is done, and now I'm applying a filter, which is type is equal to table semicolon, and ID is equal to whatever the IDs that I need, which is 18 and 23. So I'll say 18 by 23 and closing the single quotes. This will export the objects for me. Export had a problem here, so we'll go back to our administration cell and try to generate this. Original, no, I don't want to overwrite this. Original, and I'll call it tables.txt. My bad. Okay, I'm placing them here. That exports my table, and this time I'm changing the filter to be page 22 and 27. So I'll call 27 and 22. You should not be doing this way if you have the original base. I don't have it, that's why I'm doing it for the demo purpose. You should export everything. And no, I'll not like to overwrite this. I'll forgot to change the file name, so I'll call it as pages.txt. Okay, so now in my original folder I should have two files, tables and pages. Now same I'll do for custom. Create a folder, and this time my database name will change, so I'll say custom, and my database name this time is my NAB 2016 NA. Okay, and my table IDs will remain same. Let's do copy and run it here. Okay, and then my, oh sorry, I should have mentioned one more table, which is 50,000 in my case, the new table. Okay, and that I'll overwrite. Same I'll do for pages, which is page, and here I'll change it to be my pages.text, and my page ID are, okay, let's keep it this way so that I can see it. My page ID are 22, 527, 550,000. Okay, that sounds good. Now I also have a report and a code unit, if I'm not wrong. Okay, report and a code unit, right? So I'll do a ID 50,000 for report, and we'll name the file as report. This may sound complex right now because I don't have the original file. Otherwise, you just export all objects. Remember this, you don't have to get into this pane. I'm just doing it because I have no other route to kind of display to you what happens when I do this. And then I'm also renaming the file to be code unit or text. You can name it anything, the file name. So at this point, my original folder have these. The code unit contain the code unit file, the page contain the page file, and so on and so forth. Now, before we move forward, let's understand what is the difference when you manually downloaded the file versus you downloaded it from PowerShell. And that's important. So what I'll do here is I'll say custom, which is manually downloaded, and do a compare of this file and pick here the custom tables to see the difference. When I compare this file, you notice that when you do it from PowerShell with export to new syntax, the system is smart enough to understand that these two parameters are no longer needed. Every yes in NAV is transferred to true, or false is no, and every table number is now reflected with the table name. So when you translate this file and generate a delta out of it and then feed it into your txt2al, it'll be able to give you more better output as an extension, and it makes sure that everything that is syntactically correct is converted in the right way. So your amount of work that you'll have to do once you go into al will be a lot less than doing it manually. Hopefully that makes sense. So now we have the original and the custom, and now we'll generate the new delta here. Okay, I'll just remove this. This was that mistake that we did. So my original files are here, so I'll just copy this. Hopefully it takes all the files in this folder. I have never tried that, but let's see. Compare nav application object, and my original path is this. All my files are here. My modified files are in my custom folder. Let's see that custom, and my delta goes into my delta new. Okay. I still have this boolean enabled and I have the ignore documentation enabled. Let's run this. The output is same. 4 objects are inserted and 4 objects are changed. So everything looks good. So in my delta 1, I see the new delta. Now if you open this delta, any of the object, you'll see that the references has already been up to date and pointing to the right object. Let's see what happens when we convert this to AL. So now I create a new folder called AL2 and I go back into my command prompt, do an up arrow and just change the source folder names and target folder name. This becomes my AL2 where I want my output, and my delta folder, which is the source, becomes delta underscore new. With these two changes, I'm just using the same command, nothing changed, and hit enter. It did the conversion. AL2 have its own object. Now let's open this with code. When you open this one with code, you will notice all the problems that we had in the past are automatically solved here. So now my customer top 10 list refers to the customer variable, not table 18, which was happening in the past. Everything that is red right now is because I don't have the symbols downloaded, but otherwise I have to do a way less job, which is nearly nothing at this point, if I connect it to a environment where I can download symbols from. So make sure that you do it correctly, otherwise it'll be a problem, right? Now, what is your homework? Which I'll be doing at my end and you guys will be doing at your end, is to make sure that all these objects have prefixes and the field have prefixes assigned based on your company, which you have registered with Microsoft. For the demo, I'm using SDH, but that is not a registered prefix. That is just for the demo, right? Prefix are important because they help you to kind of make sure that your extension does not overlap or your field does not overlap with other extensions in the market. You do it anywhere where you add new things. So if you are adding new objects, then it becomes on the object name. If you are doing it on table extension, when you're modifying the base Microsoft, then it becomes part of your field that you're adding. I hope everybody knows how prefixes work. If not, let me know into the comment section and then we can talk about it. So next time when we meet, I'm pretty sure I'll have my version of it compiled, ready to go, and I'm pretty sure you guys will be able to do it, right? So with using text2al, you can automatically convert your objects into an extension object. The only limitation here is that it only supports anything that is an additive change. If in your customizations in CAL, you have reduced the field length, the tool will not support it. As in, it will try to convert it, but it will be an error. Any destructive changes like removing a key, modifying or adding a code in the base Microsoft trigger is something that this tool is not intended for. But even then, it does majority of the job for you. So I would highly encourage you to use text2al tool so that your conversion is simpler. So a quick recap before we end this. You will always export your objects using PowerShell, never from Object Designer and export as text. And while exporting objects, you will make sure that export to new syntax is enabled and ignore documentation is enabled. When you have exported the objects, then you run the compare object command in PowerShell. In the compare command, you also make sure that export to new syntax is set to true. The delta that is generated from the compare command, you feed that to text2al, which have these parameter source from where the file should be picked, the CAL file, the delta files. The target where you want it to store the AL converted files. The rename parameter, which helps you to get better names of your files when they are converted to an AL file. And then the extension object pattern, the new object naming pattern, how you want to name the files. And then the extension start object ID, which tells the system from which number series you would like to use for extension objects, and then the data classification if you would like to set that. Using these commands, you can convert your CAL legacy customization to an AL extension, and even if you have a heavily customized database, it'll still help you to do 40% automatic, and then rest is manual anyways. So in the next video of this series, what we'll be doing is we'll be doing the data upgrade from the BC14 CAL customize to an AL extension. For that, you should be ready with that database that you have, one, and the target extension that we just built in should be ready. You know the drill. If you like the content, hit the like button. If there are questions, add them into the comment section. If you think this is useful and will help other people in the community, do share this video on your social media. And I'm pretty sure you have subscribed to the channel. If you haven't, do subscribe it. Otherwise, you'll miss out the updates that are coming into this channel. So I'll see you sooner than later on the next video in this series, hopefully. And until then, have a great day and see you soon.